71 will be heard in the Economic Development Committee, and I'm pleased to have the Executive Director of the Good Jobs First group with me today to testify on that bill. There was recently a report issued called Paying Taxes to the Bosses that just had a national release a couple of weeks ago, so this is a very new thing to be reporting out in Missouri since some of our data is in this report. The bill itself tries to make a number of common sense reforms to how we do tax credit programs. Mainly we're trying to promote transparency, accountability, making sure that jobs that are created are full-time positions that pay family supporting wages and provide health insurance, protecting public education so that school boards have a right to veto things like TIFs so that might be a giveaway that would impact on their budgets, trying to make sure that there are public hearings instead of backroom deals, avoiding the race to the bottom so that our overall tax policy doesn't lead us into disastrous tax reduction competitions with other states that would mean a decline in public services, making sure that we listen to local citizens through things like community benefits agreements, using smart growth techniques instead of senseless urban sprawl, and avoiding rob your neighbor games like have been talked about a lot between us and Kansas City, the Kansas City, Missouri versus Kansas City, Kansas debate that's been going on lately. There are some handouts over on the side that you're welcome to pick up at the conclusion of our time here today. So without further ado, I'll just let Mr. LeRoy talk about why he's here and what he plans to tell the committee today at 5.
Thank you very much, Representative Oxford, and great to be here with everyone. So I'm here today to testify at 5 o'clock today to the House Committee on Economic Development regarding House Bill 1571, which Representative Oxford briefly described. It would make the state's economic development incentive programs more uniformly transparent and accountable. There's sort of 3 legs to the stool of the bill which follow best practices that we've identified in many other states. At its first heart is disclosure or transparency, that is, full public online disclosure of the costs and benefits of every deal every year. Where did the money come from? Who got the money? What did they say they were going to do with the money? What did they actually do with the money? How many jobs? How good wages? We think everybody has a right to know, at the very least, those basic facts about every deal. And then make sure the jobs are good jobs, that is, market-based wage standards. We shouldn't be subsidizing companies to pull wages down below the market. So market-based wage standards and job creation standards, that is, not just throw the money in the air and hope something works out, but actual job creation requirements. And then finally, enforcement, including clawbacks. That is there meaningful monitoring of the program? Do companies have to report annually exactly what they did with the money, how many jobs they created, what wages did they pay? Are those figures verified, preferably independently through sources like unemployment insurance records? And then is there a meaningful penalty, and are the penalties applied even-handedly and uniformly in the event that companies don't deliver, that the deal falls through? And we understand that we've had a recession and some deals aren't going to work out, and that's okay. We'll get the money back and redeploy the money to deals that do work out. That's normal, and it's happening in lots of states. The main thrust of my testimony in describing the bill and also talking about how we've appraised Missouri is that the state's already doing most things better than average, better than many other states. It gets a grade of C in our curve, but it's in terms of grading against other states, the state grades fairly well. And for individual programs, the state often does some things very well. It does disclosure for some programs very well. It does job quality standards very well for some programs. It does enforcement well for some programs. The problem is it doesn't do them uniformly. So this would really codify those best practices that are well established in the state and aren't hurting the state's business climate, and just more uniformly apply them across the board to sort of tighten up the ship and up the game all across the board. The other thing we want to talk about today is the new study that we just released called Paying Taxes to the Boss. And it's our tax day study. This month, obviously, as people file their personal income taxes to the state and Uncle Sam. Maybe they don't like paying taxes, but they hopefully take heart from knowing that their taxes are supporting public services, roads and universities, and healthcare and safety, and transit and disability rights, and so on. The problem is, for some people in 16 states, including Missouri, that's not true. In some cases, all or much of their state personal income taxes, their withholding taxes on their paychecks, is not actually going to Jefferson City or the 15 other state capitals. In fact, we've identified 22 programs, 2 in Missouri and 20 in the other states, affecting 2,700 companies, untold hundreds of thousands of employees at those 2,700 companies, diverting almost $700 million, about $684 million a year, back to their employers. That's where the money's going. The money's not going to public services. The two programs in Missouri are called the Missouri Quality Jobs Program, which has been on the books since 2005, and the Missouri Automotive Manufacturing Act, which is just a couple of years old. We have 4 bones to pick with these personal income tax diversion subsidies. For one thing, they're not really a tax break. We call them a tax grab, because it's not a traditional incentive where you're reducing a company's income, property, or sales tax. It's grabbing somebody else's taxes, the workers' taxes. So it's other people's money. We also have a revenue problem, and every state has revenue challenges these days. Personal income taxes are a state's most dynamic source of revenue, the one that most closely tracks the cost of providing public services, the one that most closely tracks the growth in the state's GDP annually. So when you undermine a dynamic revenue source like personal income taxes, you undermine your budget. You make your deficit worse and put more pressure on other taxes. So, for instance, the Quality Jobs Program between 2008 and 2011, the cost of the program went up more than 600%. It went from $7 million to $51 million in just 3 years. It's capped at $80, and the other program is capped at $15 million a year. So they could be, within a few years, costing the state $95 million between them. We also criticize these programs because they're involved in what we call job blackmail and job piracy, that is, the war among the states. Companies either threatening to leave and demanding big bucks to stay, or getting paid big bucks to jump state lines. And we cite prominently examples from 2 states that border Missouri. We criticize the AMC Entertainment deal, the headquarters of the movie chain that's now moving from downtown Kansas City, Missouri to Leawood, Kansas, getting a $47 million subsidy, the heart of which is a personal income tax diversion program, and also 2 job blackmail episodes next door in Illinois. Sears, the corporate headquarters there, and a company called Motorola Mobility, which is now part of Google. Both of those packages are entitled to be worth more than $100 million each, just one individual company. So, but to not be all negative and to emphasize the point I'm making about Missouri does some things well, you have something called the Accountability Portal, which was one of the best early, robust state disclosure websites that covers 6 of your economic development tax credit programs. It wasn't the very first, but it was one of the first, and it's one of the most complete in the country. And we give it high marks for the programs that it covers. We think in the spirit of that accountability portal that does a good job explaining where corporate taxes aren't paid and for what reason, you should now follow through on what we call truth in taxation for personal income taxes. So for workers who are affected by these diversions, we say on their paycheck every week or 2, it should be clearly disclosed how much money went where. That's our proposed remedy, and we'll discuss that at the hearing. Representative?
Mr. LeRoy, and I would welcome any questions that you may have.
Pretty late in the session to be getting a House bill by a minority member before a House committee.
Certainly.
This is more a symbolic gesture than anything, isn't it?
I wouldn't say that it's a symbolic gesture. I would say that it's a public education opportunity. I have filed this bill for, I think this is my 3rd year. This is my first hearing on it. It does take a while to get some traction as a member of the minority party, but every time that you have a hearing, you have the chance to help each legislator know more about the topic, and you have an opportunity through things like letters to the editor or editorial board meetings to try to help educate the public about it so that people understand more. We're all desperate to create jobs, and so tax credits are one of the only things that the General Assembly puts out that's supposed to be in that line. And I think many people are hopeful that tax credit programs will work, but they don't know much about them. You know, if you stop the average person on the street, they've heard of tax credits, but they're not sure exactly how they work. And so having a hearing on this bill helps people know more about how our tax credit programs are designed and what would be in a tax credit program if we wanted to have best practices around them. So that's what I'm hoping to do, is to raise our performance so that when we have tax credit expenditures like we do now of about $750 million a year, that we get something for them, that we're not just throwing money in the air, as Mr. LeRoy put it earlier.